are again for another London Ballet Circle in Conversation, and a very warm welcome to each and all of you. Northern Ballet is a company that excels at narrative ballets and has incredibly talented dancers who make those stories come to life. Tonight, we're going to meet one of those amazing artists, premier dancer Joseph Taylor. The list of roles he has danced is very impressive. This year, he was nominated for a Critics' Circle Award for his portrayal of Jay Gatsby in The Great Gatsby. And recently, we saw his heartbreaking interpretation of Romeo in Romeo and Juliet. And then, of course, who could forget Casanova? Whoa. Now Joseph has added another string to his bow, and he's dancing with the newly resurrected London City Ballet. Next week, Joseph and the LCB will take to the stage in Bath for their UK debut, and the excitement is really building for that. I'm also pleased to welcome Christopher Marney, Artistic Director of the aforementioned London City Ballet, who will lead this evening's conversation with Joseph. Thank you both so much for being here.
Pleasure.
If you have a question for Joseph, please type it into the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen, and please give your first name. So now, make yourselves comfortable, and let's hear how Joseph Taylor went from Lincolnshire to Leeds to London. Gentlemen?
Thanks so much, Susan, and good evening, everyone. Really lovely to be here again after only a short while since I was here talking about London City Ballet. I'm really pleased to be interviewing Joe tonight. I'm proud to say that we've got to know each other really well over the last couple of months in the rehearsal studio, and as many of you know his work as premier dancer at Northern Ballet, you'll know that he's shown such a vast versatility in all of the roles that he's conquered. We'll get to talking about Romeo because I'm sure there's going to be lots of questions, Joe, about the recreation of that role and that ballet later on that many people have seen you in at Sadler's Wells recently. But I thought we'd start at the beginning, which is always a good place to start. And perhaps you could tell everyone a little bit about how and why you started, what inspired you to start dancing in the first place.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So I like to think of myself as just your average Joe, and I really have no idea how I am here today, where I am. But it all started off in Lincolnshire. Like Susan said, I come from a very small town on the East Coast, Skegness. I'm sure maybe some of you have heard of that. And my parents would be very busy during the summer months, working every day. So my auntie and cousin next door would babysit me during the summer. And my cousin would be in dance lessons. And in an evening when she came home, I would ask her a few questions. What was it that you did today? Can you show me something you did today? Like, teach me what you did today. So I was quite inquisitive about dance, but I was also very, very shy. These initial questions sort of then turned into going and watching my cousin's classes. I must have been 6 or 7 and she was maybe 15, 16. But just getting inside the dance studio to watch a class was a big step. I used to sort of peer around the door, not dare take one step in. But eventually my confidence built and I got into classes at my local dance school, the Janice Sutton Theatre School. And I was a little bit indecisive. I would go for a few weeks and then I would stop. A few months later, I'd start back up again. So it wasn't something I was doing, solidly every week. And I think that was just through insecurity and shyness. But evidently my teachers thought that I had some talent, and they suggested that I apply for the Royal Ballet School Associate Programme. So at aged 9 and 10, I was then traveling to Manchester once a month to take part in the associate program of the Royal Ballet School. That would be an hour drive to Grantham and then at least another hour on the train to Manchester for a class on a Saturday. That then led to auditioning for the Royal Ballet School, and at aged 11, I find myself at White Lodge in Richmond Park, which is very, very different to Skegness. Nothing like I'd ever witnessed before. So basically, my time at the Royal Ballet School was limited to 2 weeks. I came home the first weekend. I think I was I was 11 years old. I don't think you really know what you want to do in life. I had no idea that I wanted to dance. I had no idea that it could be a career option. I just kind of had been snowballing along and it ended up there. I knew I enjoyed dancing, but I didn't know at 11 that it could lead to something more. So yeah, I came home the first weekend and my parents had to lock me in the car to get me back for the second week, which they did manage to do. I think at some point during the second week, my dad got up at 2 a.m. and said, right, that's it, I'm going to get him. He didn't, but I did come home after 2 weeks and left the Royal Ballet School. Galen Stock, the director at the time, she called my parents several times asking for me to come back and ease me back in. But I think I was just so shocked and scared, to be honest, of where I'd found myself and why was I there. I'd left my family, the small town behind. So I then continued dancing at my local dance school. I stayed along with the Royal Ballet School in their associate program, so I went on to the mid associates and the senior associates, and that was every Saturday during term time in Covent Garden at the upper school. So on a Saturday morning.
Did your sister continue along that line as well, or did you?
My cousin, sorry, my cousin.
Oh, cousin, and did she?
No, she was just a local dance school. It was a hobby. She
Right.
wasn't doing anything serious. I stayed on, yeah, the associate program. But you can imagine 13, 14-year-old me getting up at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning for my mum or dad to drive me an hour and a half in the car to Peterborough, an hour on the train to King's Cross, 3 stops on the tube to Covent Garden, to do 2 hours of associate classes on a Saturday. I wasn't always willing to go, I must admit, kind of grumpy teenager. It was, I have to thank my parents a lot for really keeping me going, keeping at it. And then at 16, when it was kind of a crucial point in training, I did the rounds of auditions again for the upper school vocational training, and I joined Elmhurst Ballet School, as it's known now, in Birmingham, in association with Birmingham Royal Ballet. I had 3 years of vocational training there at the upper school. I had lots of catching up to do. All of my classmates had been in training since they were 11 years old. I'd been doing it as a hobby during the week, and these classes, I think it was maybe 24 times a year, so it really didn't add up to much like physical intense training. So at 16, when I was in Birmingham, I had to catch up a lot, and I really feel like my first year there was focused on catching up. I used to do class with my year group and the year 10 group, so that was 2 years younger than me. I used to do both of their classes to catch up. And then upon graduation, I found myself at Northern Ballet.
Gosh, and I bet that move to Birmingham felt different to the one aged 11, didn't it? That you felt
a little bit different.
A little bit more prepared.
A little bit different. If I'm being completely honest, I do feel like at 16, I was still unsure of, I couldn't see where my life was going with dancing. I didn't really have experience of going to the theatre much as a kid, and knowing that there was a world out there and a whole industry out there for this art form. So I really started to learn that at Elmhurst and see where this career could eventually take me.
And Joe, did you, because you're known by so many members for, really sort of delving into characters and playing characters as part of, playing a part of a story. And, I'm interested to know whether from childhood or whether from Elmhurst that was something about dance that you felt passionately about. Was it just the technique, or was it the telling a story that started during your training, or really when you went to Northern?
It was definitely when I went to Northern. I think at school there's not so much focus on narrative. We never had drama classes or anything like that,
Right.
which in hindsight would have been a really good idea. Maybe they do now, I'm not sure. But yeah, that was definitely when I joined Northern, that the characterization and the narrative work was kind of really put into me. I wouldn't say it came from me. It was definitely an aspect of training that started when I joined a professional company. I
And
was
how
always
did that?
interested in movement and dancing and the music, and I did gymnastics as a kid and all the physicality that goes with that.
Right.
Characters was kind of really Northern Ballet.
Right. Okay. And tell us about how the job came about. Was it an in-house audition, or was it part of an audition tour that you were doing, or did you know that that was the company that you wanted to focus on?
So I had no company in the UK on my radar whatsoever. I thought it was way out of my league. I thought, there's all these schools across the world that are fighting for these jobs. So I had done auditions in Germany, in Estonia, in Spain. I'd done auditions for cruise ships. I was really trying to keep my options open because, there aren't many jobs out there, and it's a very, there's lots of competition. So one day, David Nixon, the director of Northern Ballet at the time, came to watch a third year class, the graduate class. And the rumor at the time was that he was interested in another boy in my class. But after he watched the class and a day of rehearsals, he invited me up to Leeds to take class with the company and do a bit of an audition process up there. So I'd done that. I'd never been to Leeds before. I find myself at Northern Ballet's HQ, Quarry Hill. I'm doing class with a professional company for the first time, because all the other auditions are kind of like open calls. I think the one in Germany, there was over 100 people there. So that was a completely new experience to me. I learned rep with one of the senior dancers at the time. The ballet was Cleopatra. It was quite sexual, if I can say that. I was 19 years old. But yeah, I think, well, I know so that David saw something in me and offered me an apprenticeship with the company. He's made light since that people didn't really understand why I'd been hired. They didn't see the potential I had. Very young, very green, probably still a lot of catching up to do. But yeah, I'm so grateful for him for getting me out into this industry.
Well, he obviously spotted something in you that he thought was going to develop, because the journey that you made in the 11 or 12 years that you've been in the company has been huge, and escalated to such a level of premier dancer where you are now. And what was that first year like? Some of the members were involved in a chat with Casper, who's a dancer at the Royal Ballet, and we were talking a little bit about that first experience of joining a company, and like you said, being green and not having any experience yet, and that it does take it can take up to a year to really kind of find your place and be brave enough really to come forward. Obviously you did that because of the trajectory you've been on, but what was that first year like?
I'm pretty sure I would have been a deer in headlights. Yeah, there were a few things that I was taken out of because maybe they didn't think I was ready. And I was only an apprentice. I was the lowest rank in the company. But a big part of Northern Ballet is the touring. So my first memories of looking back on that first year was adjusting to living out of a suitcase on the road.
Mhm.
I think in my first year, we actually did 9 weeks straight on the road. So that was a huge adjustment. Also, Northern Ballet is at the time and is now full of amazing personalities in the dancers. And I think that's why they can tell stories so well, because the diversity of people is just intimidating but inspiring. So I think they welcomed me, they encouraged me, they pushed me, and David gave me opportunities. From my second season, I was dancing my first principal role, which was my second season, I danced my first soloist and principal roles, which meant I was rehearsing soloist roles at the end of my first season.
Wow.
So I was also thrown into the deep end a little bit. Yeah. And I think when you're young, you're so scared to put a foot wrong. You don't want to draw attention for the wrong reasons. You want to draw attention for the right reasons. So I think I just really focused on trying to prove what I was capable of at that moment in time, but also learn from all of the people around me. You know, just eyes absorb as much as you can, like a sponge. And from there, it just kind of kept going like that, I suppose, to where I am now.
I think the wonderful thing about the company is the amount of performances that you get to do. I find, especially for having worked at Central School of Ballet and seeing some of the students graduate into Northern Ballet, is that they get so much performance experience under their belt straight away that somehow that fear of being on stage or trying different things and pushing yourself that little bit further becomes second nature because of the vast amount of shows that you actually do.
That really is invaluable. Like in my first 2 years, we did in each season, sorry, we did 4 full-length productions.
Gosh.
So in my first 2 years, that's 8 full-length productions. We have at least 3 casts in each production, sometimes 4. So we would all have multiple spots, 7 shows a week, 9 weeks on tour, like I said. That first year when we created The Great Gatsby, we did 9 weeks on tour, 4 casts, 7 shows a week. You know, you are on stage a lot and you learn the most about yourself on stage. You work hard in the studio, but I found you learn the most on stage. And like you said, like we get so much experience with that, I think that catapulted my sort of career.
And you can see that too, Joe, because you have such a humility towards your work that, you know, even the things that we've been doing over the last couple of months, even if they're not particularly narrative roles, you seem to always find an intention behind them, even in very different ballets, that you're bringing a different person to those things. And that's that, you know, I think for an audience member, that's where we can really connect, because you see the artistry straight away in everything you're doing. So what was the kind of breakthrough role? Not necessarily the first title role or principal role, but was there a soloist role perhaps that maybe catapulted you, or that you felt this is my big break moment?
I would say that in my second year, we did Cleopatra by David Nixon. It was created 2 years before that, the year just before I joined. And I danced the role of Wajet, which is the snake god of Cleopatra. And he opens the show and he closes the show alongside Cleopatra. He journeys through her life with her. So we dance a lot with Cleopatra. And at the time, that was 3 leading dancers of Northern Ballet. And I was the second cast, dancing with an Italian girl, Michaela Paolacci. Kenneth Tyndall was the original Wajet. He was the first cast. I was the second cast. He was well into his career, and I'm basically just starting out in mine. And he helped me tremendously to learn the ropes of what it is to be a leading man and to be a partner and to sustain a narrative and the physicality of a 2-hour show. So I would say that's the first one where, after having the opportunity of being cast, being coached, and working with Kenneth and David, that maybe other people started to realize, oh, actually, this guy does have something, he's going to go somewhere. Also, I would like to think that's quite, big-headed of me to say, but that's what I would like to think, that maybe that was the moment where people sort of saw that I could go somewhere.
Right.
I did get promoted after that season, a few ranks up into the corps de ballet. So, yeah.
And the pas de deux that you were talking about from Cleopatra, in the 50th anniversary gala of Northern some years ago, was that one of the pas de deux? I know that you did a pas de deux from Cleopatra.
I did a pas de deux from Cleopatra, but not. It wasn't the same one. This was another role of Mark Antony, which I didn't get to perform, but would love to.
But immensely difficult pas de deux, I seem to remember, with some really unusual lifts in it.
Yeah, I love the ballet. The music is by Claude Michel Schoenberg, the composer of Les Mis. And also, I was really fascinated by ancient Egypt at school. So it was kind of a lot of things coming together. Yeah, I would absolutely love to do it again.
Wow, wonderful. And I did want to ask you, because you've spoken previously about the role of Anthony in Swan Lake, in David Swan Lake, as being a role that meant a lot to you. And I think it's probably not a ballet that we've seen in quite a while. But I wondered if you could tell us just a little bit about that role, the first time you did it, and a little bit perhaps about the different type of story and characters that David uses in his Swan Lake.
So it's very, very different. It's not a traditional Swan Lake at all. It's very, very hard. I remember every time the curtain went up, I would think, oh my God, please let me get to the end. But yeah, the role of Anthony is kind of like the Siegfried. The role of Benno is his friend Simon, and Odelia is kind of there throughout as another friend. So it's a triangle of friends. And there's kind of some like relationships going on between the three of them, some confusion, some jealousy. And the backstory to the ballet is Anthony, when he was younger, loses his younger brother in a lake when they were out swimming at night. It's set in America, in a big manor house, kind of summer by the lake kind of situation. So he's kind of tormented by the lake because he feels guilty and is to blame, feels like he's to blame for the loss of his younger brother. So he kind of finds himself at this lake after having this confusion with his sexuality and his friends, and comes into contact with this swan at the lake. And that is where the traditional ballet kind of is more prominent in this version. The Act 3 is where the Odelia character comes back and resembles this swan. There is no black swan as such. She's dressed in white in Act 3, dancing to the black swan music, but he kind of is confused between whether it's his friend or this vision of a swan he saw in the lake. And to cut a longer story short, he gets emotionally tormented by all of these different characters and commits himself to the lake to go back to his brother. But it is a very, very hard production in terms of partnering. It's not so technical as a classical Swan Lake. It does have similar elements, but one of the final lifts is on the back of the girl's neck and her thigh, completely into the air. So that's why at the start of the show, I'd be like, please just let me get to that lift. And when I first did this ballet, I was also doing the father and a core spot. So 7 shows a week. I'm in 3 casts. I remember the very last day we were in Milton Keynes, and I had a show of Anthony on the Saturday matinee and the corps de ballet, which is also very challenging. American football, bicycles, like there's a lot going on in the evening. And I just remember being like completely exhausted from, I'm not sure what year that would have been, maybe 2015, 2016. But I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to show I could do it. I wanted to show I was capable. But I think it did me well, because when the ballet came back a second time, I wasn't doing the corps de ballet anymore. I was first cast Anthony, and I could really sort of put into practice what I'd learnt in previous years and hopefully do it stronger.
Mm. It's amazing to hear that you covered and played all of those roles within, within possibly a week of doing the same show. And I remember us talking about your Romeo and Juliet experience, which we'll get to, and you saying that you had various roles, Lord Capulet, Romeo, in that same production. And I think that's the beauty of the company as well, isn't it? That you can find yourself doing really diverse roles within the same week. It gives somehow I think an overarching respect for sort of all ranks and all people in all different hierarchies of the company, because you're touching upon those different roles and not just staying in one category.
You really get a better understanding of the story, of the narrative, when you're seeing it from so many different points of view. So doing one role helps your other role, and so on and so forth. In The Great Gatsby, I've done all male roles bar one in that production, but none of them you can do from a selfish point of view, because the narrative relies so much on the crossover and interaction of all these different characters, that what you're doing in one scene affects somebody else 2 scenes later that you probably don't even dance with. So yeah, that's another reason why I think Northern Ballet is so great at the narrative work, because we experience it so much from so many different angles.
It's sort of like an actor's perspective, isn't it? It's taking on an actor's role in the sense of reading and understanding the whole script. By doing these things, it helps you to have an understanding of the whole ballet. You mentioned Casanova and Kenneth Tyndall earlier, and obviously that has been something that that you've become very known for, that role and that ballet and the way it was created. And I mean, you've performed that over quite a series of seasons. I think it's a ballet that you've done.
We've done it in 2 different periods.
Right. And was that the first creation that you did with Kenny, or have you had experience of working with him as a choreographer before?
That was the first full-length creation I'd done with Kenny, but I had done numerous shorter works with him.
Right.
When we came to creating Casanova, I knew him very well. He knew me very well. So it was a complete joy. I wasn't creating the role of Casanova the first time in 2017, but I was creating the corps de ballet. I was doing Casanova in the third cast. So I was in the room with him most of the time, pretty much all the time.
Mm. And I was wondering a little bit about some of your dancing partners as well, because it's I know that you've had certain female dancers that you've worked with very often through the career, but also that you switched around at Northern Ballet, and you don't only dance with one person. You have that experience and that impact of other people's sort of dramatic effects on you as well, which I think is wonderful. But most recently, I think there was a partner, Romeo and Juliet, that you worked with many years, who retired.
Yeah, so Abigail Prudames was my work wife, so to say. We have been dancing together since 2013, so just over 10 years. And David Nixon kind of brought us up together in the company, dancing alongside each other in many, many ballets, many roles. Not strictly just the two of us. Like you said, we've had experienced many partners, but it was the relationship that was quintessential to both of our achievements. Yeah, it's a trust and an understanding and a chemistry that I don't think everybody gets in their career. I think people maybe look for that one special partner, and I feel incredibly grateful to have experienced that and to have lived that experience on stage countless times in countless cities, countless productions. Yeah, there's a very, very special partner, and terribly sad that she's retiring, but I'm super happy for her in her next chapter.
Yeah, wonderful. So moving on to Romeo and Juliet, I remember, and a lot of members have seen the original production, the Christopher Gable and Massimo Morricone's Romeo and Juliet I'm speaking about. I remember seeing it in the 90s and not remembering a lot of it being young, but remembering the hail coming down and the kind of dramatic effect that it had on me as a young person. So the fact that this had been revived this year, I know has meant a lot to a lot of people who remember the company, especially during the Christopher Gable era, and who obviously set the tone for this dramatic work. So I would love to hear a little bit about that reconstruction. I mean, many of the members saw it, and I was interested to read in the program that some former cast members came back to set the ballet. I know your ballet master, Daniel de Andrade, was part of that original cast as well. But it was just interesting for me to see the amount of research that went into understanding the text and the sword fighting and the original concept. And I think it'll be wonderful to hear a little bit about that from your perspective.
So from the moment I joined Northern Ballet, this production was spoken about between dancers, between all the members of staff. I heard so much about it all of the time, how much the company loved it, what a great production it was. But sadly, it was completely destroyed in a flood on Boxing Day 2016, I think. And all the sets and all of the costumes were completely wiped out, covered in mold. Like, it was a complete disaster. So I'd never seen it, and I'd never performed it, and never thought I was going to get the chance to perform it because it was, dead and buried, much like Romeo and Juliet themselves. And then I think it was Federico, when he took over, it was very clear and evident that this was his main task. He wanted to get this production back to life. He had danced the same version in Italy with Alina Coccicaru. And it was the only kind of ballet from Northern Ballet's repertoire that he danced. So it was his strongest connection into our repertoire. And he desperately fought to get it back, to find the funding and to bring it back to life. So that all started with the technicians, really. They had to rebuild the set. In 1991, when it was created, there were no blueprints, there were no set designs. They just had the bare bones of what was left and a few videos and photographs from the original production. The wardrobe department had to salvage as much as they could, take out mold, replace new things, and keep it as close to the original designs as possible. So I think, in truth, the technicians and the wardrobe department had the biggest challenge. They did it with great pride, though. We, on the other hand, we had excitement. It wasn't a scary, daunting task. We wanted to do it. We had people around us that had danced the production thousands of times. We were eager to get going. And yeah, like Chris said, we had Jane Pink and William Walker, the original Romeo and Juliet from 1991, to come back and restage this work with us alongside Massimo Morricone, the choreographer. And I think in total it was maybe 6 weeks of learning a full-length production that nobody in the company knew. One dancer had done a Gypsy Girl before, but the majority of the company did not know the production. So it was completely learning it from scratch. Normally there's like, a couple people in the ranks above you that have done the show and help out in the studio. Our ballet mistress didn't know the production. It was a mammoth task. But one of the highlights of my career, I think, so far is, bringing it back to life and seeing it put on stage again with so much love and respect for Christopher Gable and Massimo's production. It's an iconic production, and yeah, we wanted to go beyond just choreography. We had Sir Gregory Doran, who used to be the director of the Royal Shakespeare Company. He came in and worked with us for a week on the text, where we were reading the text, translating the Old English, Shakespearean English into modern day English so that we can understand fully everything that was going on. And it was so interesting to hear him talk about these characters and in our minds see what we were doing in the studio. Like, it all started to make so much sense. Yeah, he was really, really inspiring. And I think he also loved the production as well. He came to watch opening night. He came to watch in Sad as Wells, I believe. So I just hope that we did the original cast proud, and all of the people that came before us who have danced this production, many of whom I know, but I've just never seen them dance the roles. But I think it was a huge success, and great credit to Federico for really staying persistent with wanting to get it back to life, because I think he had hoped it would come back sooner, but timing wasn't right. Finances weren't maybe there, but it has come back to life this year, which I feel incredibly proud of the entire company and the entire organization for achieving.
Wonderful. Well, you definitely did that production proud, and I know that that many of the original cast members were there as well on the opening night.
Yes, a few of like the original Nurse and Lady C and all the original Mercutio was there. Who was also the original Scrooge, which we're doing next season in A Christmas Carol. So yeah, it feels like lots of generations are coming back together, which is really nice.
Wonderful. I remember for years on the wall at Central School of Ballet was a picture of Jane Pink Regan, Jane Regan, as many people would know her, and William in this big drape in Romeo and Juliet. And I think that generations of dancers who went, especially through Central, were aiming for that and looking at that, knowing about that production. Yeah. You reminded me a little bit about Christopher Gable and how wonderful it is to have this much research and intention put back into these ballets, which can so easily be lost when steps are just taught from film. And something he used to say, because I feel sort of lucky enough to have had just a couple of years of training with him before he passed away. He used to talk so much about, you hone and you hone and you hone your technique and you work on your technique in the studio. And then when you get on stage, you have to completely forget about it and live inside the character. And that always stayed with me. But I think hearing about the way you speak about the way the production was brought back and with the integrity it was, it's lovely to hear that his his meaning and his words still live within that. So that's very exciting to hear.
Yeah,
so I know the answer to the next question, but I would love you to tell the audience a little bit about how this opportunity for us to work together at London City Ballet came about, because I would say to everyone that I've seen Joe dancing over many years, many productions, but probably we've only met in the last couple of years. Yeah, I was wondering perhaps you can tell people a little bit about how the London City Ballet connection has happened.
So, like the long story or the short story?
Up to you.
Um, well, I would say about two seasons ago, I was kind of having what I called a mid-career crisis. I was definitely happy at Northern. I loved the work I was doing, but I was wondering if I should be looking for more because I was hungry. I wanted more, and a very good friend of mine in the company at the time, who's now moved on elsewhere, had worked with Chris previously on another project. And I'd said to Melindy, my friend, if anyone gets in contact with you and you're no longer able to do things because you're moving abroad, like put my name forward, put my name forward. So we first got introduced through Melindy, and I met with Chris, and he told me about this project he was doing, and would I be interested? And I was, yes, I need to do more. I need to learn more. And that project was restaging a Macmillan ballet that hadn't been seen since 1972. The ballet's called Ballade, and it's loosely based on Kenneth and Deborah's first meeting and their following dates and how their relationships came about. The ballet was performed by the new group of the Royal Ballet in Portugal in 1972, like I said, and then was never seen again since. Macmillan went on to become the director of the Royal Ballet the following season, and the smaller, shorter works were kind of like, I guess, put to one side, only naturally because he had more things to be doing, more people to be looking after, and creating Manon, which he did next. So Chris obviously wanted to bring this back to life and have it restaged, but there was no recording, no photographs. I think there's only one original cast member still alive. But there was a very rough Benish notation of the piece, which was all we had access to. We had Samara Downs, a principal of Birmingham Royal Ballet, come and teach us the work from this score. It was a working score, so there were a few blanks here and there that we kind of had to fill in. But we spent a week at the Opera House with Chris and a few other dancers, bringing this, I would say, forgotten work back to life. And yeah, at the end of that week, we did a run of the piece for Deborah Macmillan and Monica Mason, and a few other invited guests. That was last March, was it?
Yeah, I think it was the end of March last year, and just we managed to sort of put it all back together in a week.
Yeah. So that was our initial meeting, and after that, Chris said, "Oh, there is another project I was kind of wanting to talk to you about," and we met at the Opera House. We'd gone to see an Insight in the Claw Studio or something. We met there, and I thought it was going to be something similar, like a ballet being put back together, and did I have a week I could do this. But lo and behold, it turned out to be the complete resurrection of London City Ballet. And would I be interested? Yes, not a second thought. Not a second thought. And here we are now, about to open next week in Bath.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience putting that project especially back together, because it did lay the foundations of what London City Ballet was going to become. It was going to be a ground for recreating and re-looking at works that have perhaps fallen out of Main Street repertoire. So coming towards London City Ballet and knowing Joe's involvement and knowing his history of being such an experienced artist, it felt natural to ask him to be part of the company. And I'm so pleased Joe's joined, because we have a wonderful group of 14 dancers, half of which, like Joe, I have approached and offered a contract to, because I've worked with them in various other companies or schools. And then we held a big open audition to find the other half, the other 7 dancers who have joined. And what has transpired is that we have a wonderful range of artists in the companies, from new graduates to experienced principal dancers like Joe, which all complement each other perfectly for the roles that are coming up in the ballets that we're doing. We also had a wonderful weekend in Portugal, which was, I would say, the first performances of London City Ballet are happening next week in Bath. That is the full company and the full program. But we did have a little prequel to that with Joe and Isadora, one of the other dancers from London City Ballet, last weekend, because we were invited to the Sintra Festival. I don't know if anyone's been to Sintra, but it's a beautiful town that is half an hour up into the mountains, very high up into the mountains, from Lisbon. And Joe and Isadora performed there on quite an unusual stage. I'll let Joe say a little bit more about the stage and the setting, but it was quite a momentous moment to see London City Ballet, 2 dancers from London City Ballet perform, especially because the company had been part of the Sintra Festival in the 90s. So it was it was very much a full circle moment being there this weekend.
Yeah, it was really, really special. The location was absolutely stunning. Set in front of a really gorgeous hotel, the sun setting in the background, surrounded by trees up in the mountain. Like, it was a really unique location. I've never danced anywhere like that before. But yeah, really special to be part of the rebirth of London City Ballet. We danced Concerto by Kenneth Macmillan, the second movement, which I had danced before at Northern Ballet when we did our own Macmillan triple bill. And I should have mentioned earlier that when I first saw that relayed on the BBC when I was still in high school, I kind of started to understand, oh, that's what I want to do. How do I become them? So it holds a special place in my heart and in my dreams. So to be able to do it again and in such a stunning location was a real dream come true. And then we also danced a pas de deux by Liam Scarlett from a ballet called Constellations in Lieberstrom, which he created in 2009. It was one of his very first choreographic ventures. It was created on Tamara Rojo and Laura Moreira, so stellar cast. And we, like Chris was saying, he wants to resurrect some ballets that have been lost and maybe not seen so much. And this was another one of those. Really stunning, beautiful duet. Based on the 4 pieces, based on a couple in various stages of their relationship, and this is kind of the middle duet where things maybe start to have a few complications. But yeah, a really, really great experience.
And wonderful to have Laura Moreira teach and coach that too. So she has been working with the dancers on the piece and relaying it, I would say, by the fingertip, everything, every detail. There's a part in there that she calls emotional feet, where the Joe is holding onto the woman and she has to lower her feet slowly down to the floor in 4th position, and every sort of movement it felt came from a feeling. And I always think that if that is the way that is passed on to a dancer is so important, because it can really make the artistry in the piece thrive and read to an audience member. And I would say that Laura is exceptional at passing on that sort of information.
Yeah, that was an unforgettable experience working with her. And I can't wait to do it again when we learn the full, the other two duets and put the full piece together.
And I must say that she enjoyed working with you very much, Joe. And I think I told you this before, but she said, "Oh, Joe, I could just dance pas de deux with him all day," which is wonderful.
Very sweet.
Um, so as I said, we do open our full performance next week in Bath at the Theatre Royal, and then we have pretty much a different venue every week until the end of September. And there's a few new venues in there for you, isn't there, Joe? I mean, you've done the touring circuit, I know very well, but there are a few new places for you to visit, I believe.
Yeah, we're going to some very nice places. I've not danced in Windsor and Cheltenham. I've been to York many times, but I've never performed in York. So yeah, I'm really excited to get on the road with London City Ballet and visit new places, dance in new theatres, reach new audiences. I think it's going to be a special summer.
Wonderful. It would be great to invite some questions in at this point. I do have a couple of other questions to finish later on for Joe, but I'm sure there are lots of questions from people. There is one here from Jane Lambert, who has had troubles with her connection, so it's been a little bit on and off during our talk. But I'll just read this to you, Joe, and perhaps you can answer this one. But it's about two different versions of Romeo and Juliet. Jane says, if I'm not mistaken, Joe has danced the lead role in both Mayo's version of Romeo and Juliet, Jean-Christophe Mayo, and Morricone and Gable's. If that is true, how do those roles compare?
Yeah, so I have danced in those two productions, and I love them equally, but they are both so different. Mayo's version is it's told from the point of view of Friar Lawrence. So it's it's a timeline of events through his eyes. And the choreography is more abstract in its physicality, but the narrative there is there nonetheless. And whereas Gable and Morricone's version is very real, it's very raw. There's blood, there's fighting, there's the rain. It's visually they are both very different, but both highlights in their different ways. So I have danced Romeo in Gable, and I haven't danced Romeo on stage in Mayo's version. I was covering Romeo. I did it a few times in the studio, but I never actually did it on stage, which is a bit of a disappointment. But I did do Friar Lawrence, who is one of the central characters. It's much more prominent than in the plays and in the other ballets like Macmillan and things like that. It's a very unique perspective to see it from Friar Lawrence's eyes. And when you do it, it makes so much sense because it's all down to him. These two people died because he was the one that married them, the forbidden love. He put it together. So he has a massive part to blame. And there's a moment at the end of Mayo's version where Friar Lawrence comes into the tomb and wakes Juliet up, knowing exactly what is going to happen because he's reliving his memory. And I'm getting goosebumps now thinking about it, but it's yeah, it's just such an interesting perspective. Whereas Gable and Morricone, you're playing it in the real time, which is equally as beautiful. I mean, the story, the music, it's just, they're both iconic productions in their own right because Mayo's Orange is very much a staple work of Le Ballet de Monte Carlo, and Gable and Morricone is a staple work of Northern Ballet. So it's the same world, both in Verona, but they're worlds apart. So yeah, it's hard to compare, but I love them dearly, both of them.
Wonderful. And on staying on Romeo for a while here, interesting question from Rosie Gerard is about the experience of dancing both Tybalt and Romeo and how that informs each other, because obviously you're, two roles that are very different, conflicted roles as well.
Say that again, sorry.
about how the experience of dancing both Tybalt and Romeo informed the characters.
I never get to play the bad guy, so playing Tybalt was like so much fun. Um, really hard because when you've got a sword flying at you and you're not, and you have to really think, which way am I going first? Like, what character am I? But yeah, it's that it was amazing. I love Tybalt just as much as I love Romeo, but for different reasons.
Great. Well, Jane's coming to York, and also a message here from Miss Agar.
Oh my God, is that Miss Agoma?
Melanie Agar, good to hear from you and about your adventures since JA's. And
I
when
got my
are you
teacher
coming
from
to
Manchester. That's so amazing.
York?
I saw you in Hull a few years ago. When are we coming to York?
York, we are coming on the 6th and 7th of September. So we'll be there for 3 shows. So it'll be
Please
wonderful.
come say hi. Come and
Yes,
find
please.
me.
Please do. And actually, Melanie, on the Saturday the 7th at midday, we are holding an open company class in York. So you don't have to join in, but you can come and sit in the auditorium and watch the dancers in their warm-up class before the show. So if you are coming on that Saturday, then that is an option there that you can read about on the York Theatre Royal website.
Well, I can see the questions now, but someone's asking Fiona if I'm on sabbatical from
Yes.
Northern. Yes, I am still with Northern Ballet. I'm still Premier Dancer with Northern Ballet. But Federico's very kindly agreed for me to have this time away to do some career development, really. I will be joining back with the autumn tour in October for more Romeo and Juliet and A Christmas Carol over the festive season. I will be going up to Leeds for 3 days in August, 3 days in September to catch up with a few people, learn some more rep, rehearse a few things. So yeah, I'm still with Northern Ballet. I'm just being in 2 places at once, kind of.
And Joe, can you say a little bit about working with Kathy Marsden? That's come up as a question too, and the ballets you've done with her.
I love Kathy, and I can't wait to do Jane Eyre spring 2025. That's our next production with her. Jane Eyre, Mr. Rochester, was actually my first principal role at Sadler's Wells. So it's something that I cherish very dearly. And I don't really think that I am a Mr. Rochester physically. I don't think I suit him incredibly well, especially when I was maybe 25, 26. So I'm super excited to work with her again and delve deeper into the character now that I've matured as an artist. Yeah, not everything always suits you, and we face a lot of challenges as artists to become these different characters. You can be typecast so much, but actually in the end, that's not as interesting. You don't learn as much. So to be put out of your comfort zone is really great for you as an artist. And Kathy definitely did that with me and Mr. Rochester. She's absolutely lovely. She's doing some amazing work in Ballet Zurich. I've been over there recently and seen a few things. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with her again. She has a focus and a passion for narrative work, which suits Northern Ballet so well. And I know she really enjoys coming here and working with us. She has a very interesting style of creating a list of words that she feels represents the character. They can be emotions, attributes, appearance, all sorts of things. And she starts choreographing from these lists of 20 or so words, and you get given it on a piece of paper and think, how do I turn that into choreography? But somehow she manages to do it. And I think Jane Eyre is a fantastic ballet. So we will be in London with that next year. So please come.
Great. And then Fiona's asking, it's obvious that you've performed choreography from a wide range of choreographers. And can you say which you would quite like to dance more of? Is there a choreographer's work that you would like to dance more of?
Definitely. Macmillan for one. He's a legend, and that is one of the reasons why I wanted to join Northern Ballet, to give me the opportunity to do so. Massimo Morricone, we're doing his A Christmas Carol at Christmas. I've done the production before, but not the role of young Scrooge and Belle, which probably not many people have seen it in London, but I think as a duet, it's one of my favorite pas de deux. So I'm really looking forward to doing that and working with Massimo again after getting to know him through R&J. Kenny's played such an important part in my career and turning me into what I am today. So I really hope to continue working with him in the future. I'd definitely love to do Casanova again. I know it's going to America, to several different places. I would even love to work with him on like a ballet master kind of side as well. Like, I've experienced the roles so much, and I feel like I do have knowledge to give. So I'm already thinking about, what I can give back and with who. And I feel like Kenny's mentored me so much as an artist. I feel like that relationship is only just beginning, I hope. I would love to do work by John Neumeier. I don't know whether that will ever happen, but we live in hope, we dream. Even to watch it live, I would love to do that. So yeah, there's so much art out there. Yeah, and I don't want to limit myself to just a select few. I want to do as much as I can. COVID and the lockdowns taught me that, this only happens once. I only get one opportunity to learn from this art form, and I want to experience it in as much detail and as broad as possible. So anything.
Well, you're definitely taking one of those opportunities. It's wonderful to hear you talk about them as well, Joe, because you can often go through the day and the weeks so busy and not having time to talk about these things. And it's great to hear all of that from your perspective. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much. I will hand back to Susan because I know she would like to say a few closing words, but it's been wonderful to be here and to host Joe. And I do hope that that you will come and see London City Ballet and see Joe on stage over the next few months as we tour through to early autumn. And I believe we're going to see some of you tomorrow. Is that right, Susan?
Yes, absolutely. We're looking forward very much to tomorrow's visit to London City Ballet. I'm hoping it's the first of many visits. Hint, hint, Mr. Marney, we would like to come again. But we are looking forward to it. It's going to be really special. There's so much excitement about London City Ballet. So many members remember the original London City Ballet, knew Harold King and so on. So it's just, we all want to celebrate that, and we will do that starting next week in Bath as well. Joe, thank you so much. It's been fascinating getting to know you. We've watched you on stage. We've cried, we've laughed, you bring something special to each role. It comes across the footlights. Yes, the technique's lovely, but it's what comes from your heart.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot.
It's so special, and we're excited. And I have to say thank you to Federico for letting you go and spend your summer holidays at London City Ballet, because you can only learn more and gain more and bring back so much more experience and depth to your roles at Northern. So it's a win-win situation for us all. So thank you. And thank you, Chris. You always ask the right questions. Such an easy conversation. It's like sitting with two old friends and just hanging out together. It's great. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for watching tonight as well. I hope you will join us. If you're not lucky enough to be going to London City Ballet tomorrow, please join us in August, when we will have Nina Anshevieli from the Georgian State Ballet with us. And in September, Hope Muir, Artistic Director of National Ballet of Canada, again before their performance at Sadler's Wells. And in October, we have an in-person event with Matthew Ball from the Royal Ballet, and lots of other stuff in the percolating away. So September will come and we'll start up with a bang. But thank you all for being here tonight. All the details of everything's on the website. Once again, Joe and Chris, thanks a lot. And we will be cheering madly for all of you and for the entire company next week when you start up in Bath. So thank you so much. And good night to all of you. We'll see you again soon.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.